Hi there. I have another journal that I want to do a journal flip of, but before I do that, I want to show you this Green Dove cookie jar. You saw when I did one of my Christmas videos of my fireplace with the pennants on there. I said that I had some Green Dove cookie jars that were kind of inspired by a green dove that my dad gave to my mother when they were dating, and that would have been in the early 1940s during World War II. Actually, they have kind of a romantic story. They met at a Navy ammunition depot, and we always teased them through the years that they met while they were making bombs, World War II ammunition. So that was kind of a lifelong story of my mother and father's dating years. But that would have been in the early 1940s. They were married in 1944. So this is a cookie jar, or this is a similar cookie jar. When my mother was no longer able to care for herself, she was in a nursing home, and I took the cookie jar, her cookie jar, and she had all of her life. We never really had cookies in that cookie jar. It opens like this. We never really had cookies in that cookie jar. All of her life, when my mother cleaned house or, just worked around the house, she'd find different little bits and bops and odds and ends, and she would just put them in this cookie jar. And all of those things were still in that cookie jar when she grew older, and so I had the cookie jar, and so I dumped out all of the contents, which is what you see here. Look, there's a clothespin, and I guess this is mine. This is not hers. This was a purse holder, but there were other things. Here's an old light bulb, a button cover. Here's an old cork, just all sorts of odds and ends. Look, here's a dime bank. I should put some dimes in there. But there's just a whole bunch of odds and ends. Well, I dumped them all out, and in her cookie jar, I put candy. And I took it to her when she was in a nursing home, and she had that cookie jar to the day she died. This is a replica. I mean, this is not a replica. I found this one when I was antiquing. So, I think the original cookie jar went to my younger brother, but that's okay. I'm fine with having this one. Now, the story of this, and why I want to show it to you, is because when I dumped out all those bits and bops, and there were more, I've got some more in another box. I dumped them all out, and let me show you here. This I created and this isn't not a new one. This is an older one. I'm not an older one. I didn't do this in the past year. I did this, I believe, in 2011. I worked on it for about a year, 2011, 2012. And it's I guess you could call it an art journal. It's sort of a cross between an art journal and a scrapbook. And I have this clasp, everything on here, all of these bits and bops here, not the ribbons. The ribbons are mine. But here's a barrette that my mother had, and that either belonged to my sister or me. There's buttons here, some hair clips, these little clips, I got them tucked in, they're glued down. Here's a wooden nickel. So I all of these bits and bops, here's some old, when they get their license plates renewed in Nebraska, they get these little charms almost. I guess you can put them on the keychains. But here's some old license plates charms. There's that wooden nickel. There's another wooden nickel here. It's a Kennedy head, $50. Well, this is a Tim Holtz charm, but there's a penny that was in there. This backing, this green backing that you see here on the tags, came off of a chair, a recliner chair, that after my dad passed away, my brother sold an old pickup that my dad drove and bought my mother a really nice recliner with it. And she had that until the day she went into the nursing home. And this was actually an arm cover off of that recliner. The recliner has long since, you know, been used and recycled, I guess you could say. I no longer have it. Here's a tassel with a button that was in that cookie jar. Here's a key that was in that cookie jar. A chain. I don't know what this chain goes to. Where does it go to? Something. Oh, a bell. That was in the cookie jar. So I took things out of the cookie jar that my mother had accumulated for years. Not everything, because I left some things in it, because I want some things to be in the one that I have. But here's a little pipe stem cleaner man made out of a wooden nickel and a plastic hat, pipe stem cleaners. And I did this scrapbook, and I call it my Dove cookie jar. So I'm going to open this up. This was in there. This I think this was probably when they did flowers, you know, bouquets. You put your stems down, put it in a vase and put your stems down in there. I think I'll just slide this off. This is kind of the holder to hold it shut. So I worked on this, like I said, in 2011, 2012. And how this came about was I went to, when Archivers was still had their brick and mortar stores, I went to a scrap that they were sponsoring, and it was a busy week for me, and I didn't get things together to work on that time. So what am I going to work on? What am I going to work on? Well, I had purchased, you know, shopping in the store, I purchased one of these acrylic albums, these acrylic chipboard albums. And actually I purchased two. I ended up with two. I have ones with smaller pages and one with larger pages. I had taken scrapbook paper, run it through my Xyron machine, and that's how I got the base of all of these pages on here. And then I distressed the edges. Kind of my first experience with embossing here. I don't know how much of this you can see. I embossed on the border side of the page, and then I went over it with like a gold metallic, and I call it the Dove cookie jar. That dragonfly was actually a part of the paper. Had I believe it was 7 Gypsies or Graphic 45 called Nest. I think that might have been 7 Gypsies sticker sheet. And I pulled off different quotes. And this says, one of the secrets to a happy life is continuous small treats. And my mother certainly believed in that. I have on here, now I think I can show this picture. This was a picture. This is, of course, I enlarged the picture and made a reproduction. This is not the original. My mother gave me this picture when she was still living, and she said, this is the day that I knew that your dad was going to ask me to marry him. And just the day that she knew that they were meant to be getting together for life. This was a picnic that they had. Like I said, they worked at a Navy ammunition depot during World War II, and that depot manufactured ammunition and bombs. And I don't know exactly what each of their duties were. I remember my mom talked a lot about cleaning the different bunkers. So I don't think she really put together the bombs. I'm not sure what my dad did. Probably a part of the manufacturing of them. they had a company picnic. And the story that my mother told was that one of the other fellows here was going to ask my mom to take my mother home. And my dad didn't like that idea so well because he thought that other guy was drunk. So he insisted on taking my mother home. So that's kind of the story of how they met. And here's the cookie jar that he gave her while they were courting. I don't think that was on the same day. But I pulled all these little trinkets out of there, and it just really came together. I added the lace here on the page. This was nothing to do with her, but I wanted texture on the page. I also, because these pages are chipboard, and they're fairly thick, I put straight pins in the borders of some of these pages and put a button on the other side. And it just kind of makes a decorative piece here. But you can take and unwind this ribbon, and then when you flip it open, I have documented and journaled the same story that I told you about this picture. That's how I documented in this entire book. And then on the back I put things like sweet and simple, and this quote that says, "One of the secrets to a happy life is continuous small treats." A little flower pin that was in there, a little rose pin. And I think I actually found one just similar to that in my jar of broken jewelry that I broke open here not too long ago. A little heart necklace. And then if I want to close it up, I just wrap this little ribbon, which has a button on it. Now, some of these things, like these green buttons, were things that I found because I wanted to create the album. Here's the cookie jar. This is the cookie jar itself. Whoops. Right here. And when you open it up, it opens up this way. And here's the same story. I'm not going to read the journaling to you because I've kind of verbalized it here. But this tells the story of this cookie jar. And the quote here says, "A little money wisely spent, a world of sorrow may prevent." I have little quotes like that in there. I was looking at that. I was wondering, was that a rub-on? I'm not sure. I think I drew those through a stencil. Did a better job than I thought I would. And then I used all sorts of little fabric bow ties here and little curiosities there. So I'm going to do a flip of this album. Here's a picture of my mother. And you've seen this picture before here. You've seen this picture before. I have a lot of copies of this picture. Of course, this is another reproduction. And open it up, and I have tags in there, and a little poem that was on another piece that you'll see later on in this album. But I wanted to put that in there because I know my mother kept that for a reason. We need to feel more to understand others. We need to love more to be loved back. We need to cry more to cleanse ourselves. We need to laugh more to enjoy ourselves. You know, and it goes on. And here is I always thought my mother looked like a movie star when she was younger. I thought my mother was a pretty lady, and I think she still is. But then I kind of journal about my mother's growing up years as she told it to us. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just really want to show you the journal more than anything. I'll cover this in a minute after I get done talking. Don't want to dwell too much on these pages, but I do want to show them to you. This is a picture of my father. And I think you've seen this picture or a similar picture, but the picture, I have a ribbon tab holder there, and the picture opens up like this, and then I journal about my dad and his growing up years and my memories of him, and another quote on the back. So this journal is all about them in the green cookie jar. This is the house that my mother grew up in, and when she was a young girl, clear up into her, probably her early 30s. And it says, "Please take me home with you, I'm lost." And then I journal. This house means a lot to me, too, because this house is still standing as far as I know, and it's been well kept through the years. 504 South Denver. And then I journal about it and all the things that my mother told me about that house and growing up in it. Now we get into some of the things that were actually in that jar. See, I made a tag here. This tag lifts up. There's nothing underneath but embossing. I was learning a lot about embossing when I made this album. Some postage stamps that were in here, some 3-cent postage stamps, a little pencil she had, a button, a key that was in there. Of course, the ribbon is scrapbook ribbon. Took a lot of photos, took a lot of pictures of things that were in there. Of course, now, this address is no longer a valid address because they've been gone for a long time. So I think I'm safe in showing that address. These are the type of things that were in the bottom of that cookie jar. And she had address labels, pennies, buttons. There's the clips. I think I showed you the clips on the front tag. Pins, straight pins, paper clips, ink pen springs, screws. And here was a rock. Now this was, my mother this was later in her life. And my mother went out for a walk one day and had gravel roads, kind of lived in the country. And she came back and she said, "Look, I found this rock. It looks just like a heart." And sure enough, there it is. And I still have that rock in. I don't know if it's in this cookie jar or in another piece that I have. Now, I took out some of the things out of here. But this is, and then I took a picture of it on the back of that green chair that my brother had bought for my mother, the upholstery on that. I saved the armrest cover and I put pieces on the back of that armrest cover and took pictures of it. So this very much has a green and gold color theme to it. Here's some buttons that were in there, and this was a pin, a fancy little pin of a fork, and I believe that belonged to my older sister. The quote says, "Collector of lovely things." Some blue bling, some of those button and straight pin pieces tabs that I used on here, right here. You can see them there. Good to find. Here's some more photos that I took of things that were in there. Little key. I think that key is on one of the charms down here too. The wooden nickel, the little straight pin. There's the barrette and the button again. Of course, these lift out, and I journal about the wooden nickel clothespins and curiosity and creativity. Maybe I'll read this one to you. I'd written this about the things that my mother's creativity and curiosity. The ability to discover the splendid in the everyday. My mother's talent was that she could make a dull world come alive with beauty and wonder. Mother would have been a wonderful collage artist. And I think she would have. I wish that the movement that we are experiencing today was alive and as well known when my mother was alive, because she would have been a mixed media artist, let me tell you. Oh. And here I took a picture of that cookie jar, and I put it on a foam, made a little three-dimensional die cut of it. And here's all those things laid out again. And then I put priceless treasures. Here's a matchbox and the corks and just all sorts of little things. There's those little license plates, little trinket sword, little penny and paper clips. Just things that you would find around the house when you're cleaning the house. And I open it up and see I list some of the things there, made a list. Old things, new meanings. It's kind of fun for me to get this out and go through it. I haven't had it out for a while. I think of my mother when I look at this. Of course you do. More of the same. There's the wooden nickel. And even though I have more of the same pictures and everything, I write different memories in here. Here's a wedding shower limerick that my mother had saved when she had a shower for her wedding. And this was the limerick. She saved that limerick. My father taught school at that time, and the limerick goes, once Florence met a brand new professor who stopped on the street to address her. She, with one charming smile, this man's heart did beguile, and now he is proud to possess her. And then this is a song about limericks that I used as ephemera. So even though some of these photos are repeated in here, like there's a wooden nickel again, I journal about different things behind the photos. One of the secrets to a happy life is continuous small treats. There's a charm with a half-eaten apple. Here's another tag that I made here. Doodads. Here's another one of her Kennedy head $50. She collected those when they were so popular. And there's those license plates again. Of course, like I said, if you open these up, you can read different things, different memories that I had about these things. Well, this goes under there. I'll do it later. And this one opens up. Here I'm journaling about the wooden nickels. This was really a fun album to make. It took me a little over a year, I believe, to get this entire album finished. Here's a key, the key that was in there. The old buttons, piece of tatted trim. And the tag lifts up, but there's really nothing under that tag. And here's the actual pin that was in the photo right here. This little fork pin. That belonged to my sister, who's passed away now too. Some roses that were in there. Here's that plaque I read you that list early on. A little poem. It was on a plaque that was in there. Here's that little pipe stem cleaner man. Sticks and stones may break my bones. My mother was always saying that to me. Words will never hurt me. She was always telling me not to take people seriously. I finally learned. So this is kind of, my mother would say, she said, if she could see this album, I keep saying this about this album, my mother would just say, Mary, you put all my junk in a scrapbook. You journaled my junk. Now, I believe it was this page. No, I do believe that it was this very beginning page. I can't remember. I think it was either this page or this page. And I do believe it was this page that was in the Cloth Paper Scissors magazine. Just the page in the gallery section of their pages, their new pages. The very first premiere issue, I submitted this album, and they took this page from and put this in their gallery section. So I'm very proud of that that it actually shows up in a magazine. I think my Dad would be very honored. I'm going back to this page here. Of course, these are pictures that I have of my grandparents. This was my grandparents' wedding picture, and this is my mother and my father and my grandparents. This is the very last page, and what I did is I took one of those Tim Holtz plastic clamshell, the Muse tokens came in this, and I put different things that I found in this cookie jar in there. There's buttons and a nickel, and this is a lead penny during the war. And I never knew this about lead pennies, that because copper was so expensive during the war that they started making their pennies out of lead. And now those lead pennies are... Actually, I didn't know that was a lead penny until I was scrapping this at one of the scraps, and one of the ladies there told me the story of the lead pennies, how they made them during the war. Some little screws that were in there, and a rock, and here's a chain, and so here's that plaque in real life. Real tiny, tiny 2-point text. So I magnified it, and I actually wrote that. Did I write that on the back of my mother's picture? I wrote it on the back of one of these pictures, this verse, because I believe my mother kept that for a reason. And here's the back page. So this is the story of the Dove cookie jar. And I thought this would be a really good time to share this on my channel, because I'm doing all those doodles of broken jewelry and for January 2015. And this whole theme of little doodads and things we keep in our lives are little priceless treasures. And I, at this time a couple years ago, did this entire album around my mother's junk. She would say, "Mary, you took pictures of all my junk. You kept them in your cookie jar. They must have been valuable." So then I have all this fluffy. This was really a popular, well, it's still popular, but in the scrapbooking world, to put all these ribbons and everything on the 3-ring binders. This is some old trim. This was not trim of my mother's, but I really liked how the green goes with the green of the cover. So thank you for listening, and I just wish my mother could see this cookie jar today, because I think that she would say, "You scrapped my junk."